Welcome to the Ernie Chambers Show.
Brothers, sisters, friends, enemies, and neutrals. That has been my standard intro, and sometimes I want to mention that they are not empty words to me. Any female born of a man and a woman is my sister. Any male born of a man and a woman is my brother. Sometimes we're quick to judge other people on the basis of one action or something somebody else has to say. But that's where what Jesus said comes into play. As ye would that men should do unto you, do ye even so unto them likewise. Or as people say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. There is so much hatred abroad in the land. It's being sown by the people who are in the top political offices. Whoever's president has an awesome responsibility. Just by virtue of being in that office, he is given much more significance to what he does when he speaks. That's one place where I don't have to say he or she, because there has never been a female president. Maybe there never will be. But if women, could forget their differences and look at their gender and recognize that they are put in an inferior position. I don't care if they're the head of a company. They don't have the freedom to make cutting-edge decisions like a man would. They have to constantly look over their shoulder to see who might be running or walking, breathing down their neck, a white male who is likely to get the position, although having less in the way of academic or professional credentials and even ability. None of us would like to be in a position such as that, so we should not put others in that kind of position. Some people see me as a mean motor scooter, not because I oppress those who are weaker than I am, but because I'll stand up to those who are strong or who are in a powerful position and will oppress others. If we're in a staring contest, I will not blink first. I believe in myself. I trust my judgment. I'm relentless. I will not give up. I will not quit. We cannot even live the next second. We can only live in this second. If we could learn how to judge life, we could build constructs in our mind that would help us make it through the most difficult situation. We can only actually live and breathe this instant. We may be able to breathe the next instant, but a time will come when we will breathe out and not breathe in again. This could be that time for me. But if it comes, the Grim Reaper, he'll find me doing what I believe I ought to do, not what other people try to dictate to me to do. I will take advice. I will accept instruction when somebody makes it clear they know more about a subject I'm interested in than I do. I don't care who gives me that information. It could be a monkey, an orangutan, a jackal, Bigfoot if he exists, anybody, anything, because I will be as good as dead if I stop growing mentally and intellectually. I can live with myself. I can be alone and not be lonely. I don't need other people in the sense of not being able to function if there's not somebody there urging me on. But we are fortunate if we do have genuine friends. That was just a little something I felt led to say. By the way, I've never referred to myself as an atheist, but other people do. If you don't belong to a church, you don't believe the way they believe, or tell them, I don't have any inclination to get into spiritualism, witches, ghosts, goblins, and so forth. Others apply that label to me, just as they might apply the N-word or other derogatory terms. But what you see in me is what you get. Here is something that I offered to the legislature April 19th, 1985. How long ago would that be? 85 plus 15 is 100. So that brings us to the century mark. 15 years. We're 24 years past that mark. So 24 plus 15 should be, the last time I calculated, 39. So this was offered by me 39 years ago. It was designated Legislative Resolution 97. Whereas the President of the United States is scheduled to attend an economic summit in West Germany in May, and whereas during his visit, the President plans to visit Bitburg Military Cemetery and place a wreath to pay respect to those buried there, and whereas more than 30 members of Hitler's SS are buried there. They were called the Death's Head, the Schutzstaffel. Whereas the SS, rather than soldiers in the ordinary sense of the term, were an elite corps who operated Nazi concentration camps, including death camps. Whereas the Nazi regime's final solution to the Jewish problem consisted of driving out/exterminating all Jews in Europe. And whereas, pursuant to the final solution plan, the SS presided over the murder of more than 6 million Jews, employing the most cruel and inhuman methods of starvation, forced labor, torture, experimentation, shooting, gassing, burning, and burying alive. And whereas the genocidal atrocity spanned many months and spawned unspeakable human suffering, and whereas hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians of various races, nationalities, and religions died fighting against the Nazi horror, and whereas the United States played an active role in the prosecution of Nazi war criminals at the Nuremberg trials, and whereas the Holocaust should forever remain an active ingredient in the collective memory of humanity, and whereas the Nazi slaughter of Jews, Gypsies, and Eastern Europeans was facilitated by a, quote, business as usual, unquote, attitude on the part of much of the world. And whereas the President's proposed visit and wreath placing at Bitburg Military Cemetery evinces a continuation of the business as usual attitude, and whereas the President's proposed visit and wreath laying at Bitburg is an affront to all people, and whereas the attempt by the President to justify his visit to Bitburg by equating those who slaughtered people to those who were slaughtered reveals an inexcusable insensitivity, moral confusion, lack of historical perspective, and an unwillingness to correct a gross error of judgment, And whereas the belated addition to his itinerary of a visit to a Nazi concentration camp neither justifies his visit to Bitburg nor erases the inappropriateness of such visit. And whereas the ill-advised act of the President may be misperceived by the rest of the world as representing the will of the American people and may appear to be a pardoning of all unpunished war crimes, now therefore be it resolved by the members of the 89th Legislature of Nebraska, first session, number 1, that the legislature joins with other groups and individuals in imploring the President to show, quote, a decent respect for the opinion of mankind, unquote, and cancel his proposed visit to Bitburg Military Cemetery. 2, that the legislature calls on the members of the Nebraska congressional delegation to initiate or support efforts by the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives to persuade the President to cancel his proposed visit to Bitburg Military Cemetery, that a copy of this resolution be transmitted to the President of the United States, the U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz, and each member of the Nebraska congressional delegation. He made the visit. He laid the wreath in disregard of all. I read that for a purpose. I would not offer that resolution today. Not that history changes, not that what happened during that period was not as horrific as it has been portrayed, but because of what the descendants of those who were the victims of the Holocaust are now doing in terms of perpetrating a Holocaust of their own on the Palestinian people. European Jews came to Palestine. Unfortunately, the Palestinians did not stop them when they perhaps could have. And the rest of the story, as they say, is known. The Jews took over. They continued to push the Palestinians farther and farther in one direction, brought more European Jews, and those who were there took the homes of Palestinians. Those who would not voluntarily leave their homes were physically thrown out. Homes were bulldozed to make room for these Jewish so-called settlers. Then the IDP, the Israeli Defense Force, IDF, whatever it is, the other call them, as I say, the Israeli SS, would come in and say, this is now a part of Israel. Jewish settlement is a part of the Jewish land, and you Palestinians just have to find some place else to go. Excuse me. How would you feel if somebody came into your house and took it from you and said, get out? And you said, where can I go? I have children. I don't care where you go, just so you go away from here. Get out. And then can call armed soldiers to force you out. That's what the Jews did. The Israelis did. And then every time somebody comes at them about the wrong, they wave what I call the bloody shirt of the Holocaust and use that as an excuse for their Nazi-like activities. I'm going to read from an article in the Omaha World Herald. It was March 3rd, last month. Airstrikes by Israel. No, it was April. See how I make mistakes? You won't be able to tell whether it's on purpose or not, but it shows I'm human. Just a few days ago, maybe it was yesterday, and yesterday's gone. Airstrikes by Israel kill 7 aid workers. Allies condemn deaths. Charities suspend food deliveries in Gaza. Gaza Strip. Some of Israel's closest allies on Tuesday condemned the deaths of 7 aid workers who were killed by airstrikes in Gaza, a loss that prompted multiple charities to suspend food deliveries to Palestinians on the brink of starvation. The deaths of the world's central kitchen workers threatened to set back efforts by the U.S. and other countries to open a maritime, that's waterway, corridor for aid from Cyprus to help ease the desperate conditions in northern Gaza. Ships still laden with some 240 tons of aid from the charitable group turned back from Gaza just a day after arriving, according to Cyprus. Other humanitarian aid organizations also suspended operations in Gaza, saying it was too dangerous to offer help. Israel has allowed only a trickle of food and supplies into Gaza's devastated north, where experts say famine is imminent. The Jews didn't learn anything from the Holocaust, did they? There are people who deny that the Holocaust occurred. Based on what Jews are doing now, those Holocaust deniers may get more credibility accorded them by people who don't believe them, but want to take a shot at what Israel is doing now. And Bush, not Bush this time, Biden, with his chicken-hearted self, has approved billions of dollars in military equipment to Israel instead of extra powerful bombs. The Palestinians have no airplanes. They have no tanks. They have no rockets. They have no guns. They have nothing but flesh, bone, blood, and human life, which is being torn from them by these Jews who call themselves God's chosen people. Will God and Satan unite and become one when Jews who do what they're doing in Israel to the people in Gaza, the Palestinians, their God must be, in fact, a demon. Continuing. The dead from Monday night's strikes included 3 British citizens, Polish and Australian nationals, a Canadian-American dual national, and a Palestinian. Those countries have been key backers of Israel's nearly 6-month-old offensive in Gaza, and several of them denounced the killings because it was their own now. Now the killing is bad. I would say close to 50,000 Palestinians have been killed, mostly women and children. It's just like when the racists in America would attack young black children trying to go to school. One of the most famous paintings, I'm not going to tell you the guy's name, but he painted covers for the Saturday Evening Post, was of this very little 6-year-old girl surrounded by a cordon, a big, beefy white man escorting her to school with her little school book. These vicious, grown, screaming, cowardly white men and savage women screaming at this little girl. That's America, the real America. The red, white, and blue America, and why I, on the floor of the legislature, said the flag is a rag. All of the lynchings, bombings, burnings were done under the auspices of the American flag. When the Ku Klux Klan would come galloping, they would have the American flag. The cops who brutalized black people wear American flag patches. And I'm supposed to feel some kind of warm sentiment toward that rag, and people said I shouldn't say it, and that would make me say it even more. That's all it is. They don't even know how to fly the flag. You know what The U.S. Code, which is a compilation of the statutes enacted by Congress, says about the flag, among other things, it should never be flown horizontally. You'll see football games where military people and cops will unroll a big flag and fly it horizontally, contrary to the law. The stars, which part of the flag is known as the Union, because every time a new state joins, a star goes. The stripes, there are 13 of those for the original colonies. They are always, when you look at the flag, they are always supposed to be to the left of the one who's looking at the flag. But many uniforms have the Union on the right because they don't know about their flag. You know what the code says? A flag should never be a part of any clothing. They are in the form of jock straps. Women wear them as bikinis. A lot of people wear them as bandanas in violation of the law. White people do it. And it also says the flag should never be a part of any athletic uniform. Next time you see a football game, watch how many of those uniforms have flags on them, even flags on the helmet. And when the helmet hits the ground, the flag is on the ground. Yet, when the young black player and others with him eventually took a knee when the national anthem was played, they were shouted at, spat upon, cursed by people who at the time were wearing the flag inappropriately and wearing it when it's not to be an article of clothing, because they didn't care about the flag. They are racist through and through. America has not changed. It's not going to change. But those of us who, despite all of this, will retain our humanity, will try to bring about a set of circumstances where everybody has the opportunity to develop fully, the opportunity to obtain a meaningful education, a job paying enough to support a person and his or her family, all of those things that are talked about on the Ozzie and Harriet shows, but they're not realities in this country, and precious little is being made, little effort is being put forth to make them so. So anybody would be better as president than Biden. Some people could not vote for Trump if it cost them their life, but they'll just not vote for Biden because of the way he is giving a blind eye to what the Jews are doing to slaughter the Palestinians. So they're just not going to vote for anybody. And that means Trump may be your next president if he's not in jail. And let me show you how stupid these white Americans are. Trump is saying that a president is immune from prosecution for anything he does while in office. And some judges are having to think about that and ponder, could that be so? They are stupid. White people, supposedly the brilliant people, and here I am, a black man who will not wear a suit, who wears jeans on the floor of the legislature. If the clothes were good enough when I worked in the barber shop for the people who gave me my living, they were good enough for the people who a lot of times showed themselves to be my enemy and the enemies of my people. And you cannot tell a book by its cover. You have the situation where we are often the ones who try to see that everybody is given a fair shake. This idea of a president being immune the thought immediately came to me. There are 9 Supreme Court judges. Whoever's the president gets to appoint judges. I'm the president. I hire a hitman to kill 2 of the judges that I don't like. I hire the hitman, but they cannot get me for hiring the hitman. They cannot get me for conspiracy, for directing him to kill the judges, because I'm immune to prosecution. But what about the hitman? I have the power to pardon. So then I pardon the hitman. Then I send hitmen to carry out other executions, assassinations, or what have you, to clear the field for me of my enemies, and then I pardon all of them. You see how stupid white people are? And they spend time arguing seriously as to whether or not what Trump is alleging has any basis in the Constitution. But let me go ahead and finish reading this. Israel already faces growing isolation as international criticism of the Gaza assault mounts. On the same day as the deadly airstrikes, Israel stirred more fears by apparently striking Iran's consulate in Damascus and killing 2 Iranian generals. The government also moved to shut down a foreign media outlet, Qatari-owned Al Jazeera television. Yet you Americans are always saying, don't censor the media. Don't shut them up. And here America, the number 1 ally of Israel, is watching Israel do this. And you know what Iran said? Israel would pay at the right time. See, Iran has airplanes. Iran has bombs. Iran has nuclear weapons. Could this be the beginning of the War of Armageddon? That might be a lot of mythological nonsense also. The hit on the Charities convoy also highlighted what critics have called Israel's indiscriminate bombing and lack of regard for civilian casualties in Gaza. Israel's military chief, Lieutenant General Herzai Halevi, announced the results of a preliminary investigation early Wednesday. Quote, "It was a mistake that followed a misidentification at night during a war in very complex conditions. It shouldn't have happened," he said. He gave no further details. He said an independent body would conduct a, quote, "thorough investigation," unquote, that would be completed in the coming days. And what do you think their finding will be? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had earlier acknowledged the, quote, "unintended strike on innocent people," unquote, and said officials would work to ensure it does not happen again. World Central Kitchen said it had coordinated with the Israeli military over the movement of its cars. 3 vehicles moving at large. Remember, the World Central Kitchen had coordinated the movement of this convoy with the Israelis. 3 vehicles moving at large distances apart were hit in succession. Boom, boom, boom. No mistake. They were left incinerated and mangled, indicating multiple targeted strikes. At least one of the vehicles had the charity's logo printed across its roof to make it identifiable from the air, and the ordnance, meaning the bombs, punched a large hole through the roof where the logo was printed. Footage showed the bodies at a hospital in the central Gaza town of Deir al-Balah, several of them wearing protective gear with the charity logo. Celebrity chef Jose Andres, who founded the World Central Kitchen charity, sadly said he was, quote, brokenhearted, unbroke by the deaths of the staffers. Quote, the Israeli government needs to stop this indiscriminate killing. It needs to stop restricting humanitarian aid, stop killing civilians and aid workers, and stop using food as a weapon, he wrote on X, formerly Twitter. The U.S., Britain, Poland, Australia, and Canada all called on Israel to give answers on the deaths. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant launched an investigation and ordered the opening of a joint situation room enabling coordination between the military and aid groups. Yeah, Jesse James investigates Frank James, and the ones who are going to review their findings, the Dalton brothers. That's the way these Jews are functioning. Then they're going to say people are anti-Semitic because they condemn what the Jews do, which in some cases is worse than what the Nazis did, allegedly, to the Jews. But anger among its allies could put new pressure on Israel. The British government summoned Israel's ambassador for a rebuke and called for an immediate humanitarian pause to allow more aid in and for release of hostages. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak told Netanyahu that he was, quote, appalled, unquote, by the workers' deaths and described the situation in Gaza as, quote, increasingly intolerable, unquote. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby said the U.S. was, quote, outraged, unquote, to hear of the strikes, yet they're making billions of dollars in new military aid, including super bombs, available to Israel. He said the Israeli military must, quote, do much more, unquote, to avoid conflict and ensure the safety of aid convoys. And Netanyahu says, go to Hades. And Biden obediently goes. A senior Canadian government official said there will be a joint formal diplomatic rebuke at the foreign ministry in Israel on Wednesday. The deaths sent a further chill through UN agencies and other aid groups that have said for months that sending truck convoys around Gaza, particularly in the north, has been extremely difficult because of the military's failure to either grant permission or ensure safe passage. Israel has barred UNRWA, the main UN agency in Gaza, from making deliveries to the north, where the people are worse off and need it most. The U.S. and other countries have been working to set up the sea passage from Cyprus to get around the difficulties. World Central Kitchen was key to the new route. ANERA, a Washington-based aid group that has been operating in the Palestinian territories for decades, said that in the wake of the strikes, it was taking the, quote, unprecedented, unquote, step of pausing its own operations in Gaza, where it had been helping to provide around 150,000 meals daily. The UN says more than 180 humanitarian workers have been killed in the war, and Biden is continuing to give Israel billions of dollars worth of military aid. Palestine, this is not a war. This is a slaughter. The Palestinians have no guns. It is a slaughter. This is a Palestinian Holocaust. And the Jews are carrying it out. If one reaps what one sows, as the holy so-called Bible says, the Jews have something coming. Now I'm going to switch gears because we have some terrible things happening in this country against our brothers and sisters who are members of what is called the LGBTQ plus community. I don't say what I have to say in a corner or just in the legislature in this little backward state. I've spoken before Congress. I've spoken at the UN. I spoke at the White House and ran Jimmy Carter out of his East Room, and I'm going to bring the articles someday and read how that was written about. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. When I'm called on, as I was by Jimmy Carter when I was at the White House, he said, "The man in the blue sweatshirt," and that was moi. And I set him off by asking, he had said that America is not a racist country. I said, America, on the contrary, is a racist country. And why did you fire Andrew Young as a representative of America to the UN? It had to do with the Jews again. At that time, Andrew Young had the audacity to talk to Yasser Arafat, who the Jews hated, a Palestinian leader. And Carter fired him. There was a white diplomat who had done the same thing, and he kept his job. This article is dated May 19th, 1996. Testifying before Congress is another day at the office for Chambers. Lincoln Journal-Star. There he was, resplendent in a purple sweatshirt, testifying before Congress last week, none other than Senator Ernie Chambers, part of a panel of 5 legislators from various states testifying on a bill dealing with the same-sex marriage issue. Anyone who expected Chambers to change his attire or his style for this occasion would have been disappointed. Instead, a subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee and a C-SPAN audience were treated/subjected to the same Ernie with whom Nebraskans have become so familiar. Chambers started off musing whether the HON period that preceded his and other panelists' names on their nameplates meant that they were being called honey. And that was what I said, because there was a woman who headed the congressional dining room, and she had referred to some of the senators and congressmen as honey, and they wanted to fire her. So when I went there, I brought that up, and I said, so this means that that lady has been forgiven, she's been reinstated, and you're doing it by putting the abbreviation of honey on your name plates and this one, and people in the room who understood what I was talking about laughed, but the congressman grimaced. But anyway, Chambers started with that. After satisfying himself that the letter stood for, quote, the honorable, he recalled a story about a village character known derisively as Colonel, and I pointed out he was black, how they give us titles when we were never in the military, Colonel, Judge, and so forth, to degrade us even further. Anyway, I'm just going to read this. He was known derisively as Colonel, being asked by a judge what that meant. Well, Judge, it's just like the honorable in front of your name. It don't mean nothing. Chambers recounted. Having thus endeared himself to the panel of congressional honorables, Chambers went on to denounce what he considered the dishonorable business under consideration. H.R. 3396 would allow states not to have to recognize same-sex marriages if they were legalized in some other states, such as Hawaii, where a case is working its way through the courts. The Constitution has a contract clause, whatever, a contract is valid, wherever it's valid would be valid anywhere. But anyway, while there was some discussion about whether the measure gives states any power they do not already have, most of the hearing concentrated on panelists' views of the desirability of granting legal recognition to gay or lesbian marriages and discussion of the current political battles on that subject. Hawaii State Representative Terrence Tom disputed the nation that resistance to same-sex marriages stems from ignorance, saying that opposition to the idea has grown since the matter has been under discussion in the states. And it gave comments from others that were not too significant. Oh. That led, I had made a comment that there were biblical characters who had multiple wives. That biblical, let me get this straight. On the other side, Iowa State Representative Edward Fallon argued that marriage licenses are not a scarce good, and granting them equally to gay couples would not diminish the supply for straights. And then there was Chambers, noting that proponents of restricting marriage to one man and one woman often cite religious grounds. He declared that biblical figures, including David and Solomon, had had multiple wives and mistresses. That led Subcommittee Chairman Representative Charles Kennedy of Florida to ask, "Am I to understand you would support polygamy?" Chambers would not go that far. He even conceded that hypothetically a rationale could be constructed for a state to prohibit such arrangements, although he refused to say whether or not he believed such bans to be good policy. And the example I gave was of an Eastern, that means Eastern part of the world, potentate, who explained why he would not have multiple wives even though he could. He said, women are sensitive and perceptive, and a man is not going to have the same feeling for 5 different people. And he's going to, whether consciously or unconsciously, favor one over the other, and the other women will pick it up, and there'll be confusion. So he had only one wife, even though he could have had as many as he wanted. So that was the argument that a man who could have multiple wives gave. In an interview 2 days after his Wednesday appearance on Capitol Hill, Chambers said his views on gay and lesbian issues have changed considerably in recent years. In 1988, when running for the U.S. Senate on the New Alliance Party ticket, Chambers said he disagreed with the party's support of same-sex marriage. "My attitude is far more tolerant than it was in years past," Chambers said Friday. "I never knew I would have moved this far in that direction, but I became aware of the viciousness directed toward gay and lesbian people, from verbal taunts to murder. I think it has escalated tremendously in the last few years," he added. Given his self-description as the defender of the downtrodden, Chambers has added gays and lesbians to his larger constituency. Quote, "St. Jude and I collaborate in being the last hope of the hopeless," he added with his characteristic degree of modesty. In the face of yet another religious reference, it seemed only natural to ask Chambers, who is often described as an atheist, not self-described as that, what description he would apply to his religious status. "I'm just Ernie," he replied, to which admirers and detractors alike might say, "Amen." I'm going to talk about this subject more in the future because they're doing horrendous things to members of the LGBTQ community, the trans individuals. People don't choose often what their status and circumstance will be. And who are we to say somebody else is unworthy? You religious hypocrites need to get off and get away from crotch watch. What does it, and all you're talking about is what's between their legs. That's all you can think about. Why don't you go up above the neck where you have the brain, which produces great poetry, plays, novels, music, artistic work. Why don't you talk about that and be uplifting? But no, you're down there sniffing crotches. You probably, before you became in human form, was a dog, because that's what dogs do. If you watch them, they want to find out who's in heat. I guess that's why they do it. But don't they sniff rear ends? That's what you all are doing. I wouldn't call you dogs. I'll say you dog-like. you have dog practices. And is that what you want to be? These are human beings. These are our brothers and our sisters. It's like the Jews were requiring people who had leprosy, a disease that they didn't bring on themselves. They didn't wish it on themselves. But you know what they had to holler when people came near? Unclean, unclean. Forced you to self-describe yourself as unclean, and you're a human being. There has to be a change, many changes in this nation. Anything born of a man and a woman, if that one is a female, she is my sister. If that one is a male, he is my brother. It's none of my business what they do in their bedroom. I don't have any interest in it. What difference does it make to me? How does it hurt me? There are still areas in this world where men can legally, under their law, have more than one wife. Does that hurt you? Are you envious of them? And why is the woman put at the center of so many things? Not to elevate her, but to debase and degrade her and thingify her. In America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. You know what I used to tell them on the floor of the legislature, and they got hotter than a firecracker, but they couldn't do anything about it because the madder they got, the more I provoked them. It's not the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's the land of the tree and the home of the slave. And I tell them how they praise this guy who planted all these trees. I said, he didn't love trees. He was one of the racists who kept Nebraska from being adopted into the Union because they wouldn't put a guarantee into their Constitution that everybody would be guaranteed the right to vote. J. Sterling Morton. And I told people the reason he planted all those trees, not because he had a love for trees, but he wanted to be sure there would be enough trees to lynch all the black men who someday may be allowed to vote. And his statue had been in the hall, Statuary Hall in Congress, and it was removed. Chief Standing Bearer is there, a Native American, and the lady who wrote My Antonia, a lesbian, is there. But I'm not going to call her name because you all will go to that town where she lived and burn her house down. I don't know if I have any more time, but it's very close to the time when I'm supposed to stop. But I will wait and see if I can come a little closer to it, and then I will let everything go. If the fates are kind, do you believe in the fates? Then I will be back again to titillate some, torment others, and inspire great anger in still others. But how people react to me is of no concern to me. The one whose reaction matters to me is mine. People have called me some of everything, but their words don't hurt me at all. And I feel the more angry they become, the more virulent their language, the more I own them. And I've told them on the floor of the legislature, you all are my white folks. I own this legislature. But if an important bill needs to be passed, I will allow it to pass. A loaded brain is more powerful than a loaded gun. And then I add intelligently, unless you're in a gunfight. But even if you're in a gunfight and you don't have a gun, but you've got a good brain, you may be able to contrive a way to engage that gun soul's mind in such a way that he'll change his mind and decide, well, you don't deserve killing, you don't need killing, and you'll survive. Jesse James was once asked why he never robbed poor people. He said, well, I got an answer for that. They said, is it because you're like Robin Hood, you steal from the rich and give to the poor? He said, no, I don't rob poor people because poor people ain't got no money. So to the outlaws, you want to give a noble basis for what he does. But if you ask him, you find that he's just right down here on the ground. Suppose in America, everybody would be judged on the basis of what they are and what they can generate. Think of the actors and actresses, the musicians, the poets, the novelists that will never be because somebody had blown out the light of inspiration that was in their brain when they were very young, or frustrated them to such an extent when they were older that they said it's not worth the aggravation. America could be what they profess to be now, and that is the greatest place to live on the face of the earth, because there probably are more different nationalities, ethnicities, races, or however you're going to categorize the people between Canada and the Gulf of Mexico, the Pacific Ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean. That landmass might have the greatest potential in the world, but potential which is not brought into fruition is of no value whatsoever. If land lies fallow, nobody benefits from it, but if you plant crops, you provide food, and if you get more than you need, and more than you need to sell for your purposes, and share it with those who have nothing, then your country and your people would indeed be blessed. I don't say it comes from a ghost or a spirit. I say it comes from your ingenuity, your hard work, and then your generosity. Some of the hatred would begin to soften. The haters would begin to be isolated more and more. People like Trump would be laughed to scorn if they said, I want to be the president of the United States. What they say Roosevelt proved was that somebody could be president for life. Others say that Eisenhower proved that anybody can be president. And I say what Trump proved is that you don't need a president. But keep in mind what I said, and somebody out there might tell it to Trump. If a president is immune from prosecution, no matter what he or she does while in office, that president can hire hitmen to kill up whoever they want to have killed and then pardon all of them. He has already said that the ones who attacked the Capitol are heroes, that they are patriots, and that if he's president, he's going to pardon them, he's going to give them an apology. He hypocritically goes to some of the funerals of police officers or the wakes because he wants to show he's for law and order. But those he justifies attacking the Capitol had attacked police officers. And Americans are so shallow, they don't put two and two together and get four. He has got some of those people mesmerized. So now I think my time is up. Thank you for yours.
You've been watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to leave suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This is an EWC Communications production.